Changsheng, forcing me to slay demons and eliminate demons. Introduction. Muyan closed his eyes, kicked his legs, and when he opened them again, he was already in the world of cultivation, becoming a young man in Deyun City who was delivering food to the dungeon. In this world, demons run rampant, sacrificing blood to the entire city and pleasing evil gods. Mu, as the adopted son of a demon, only wanted to pursue his cultivation and then commit acts of righteousness against his family. He secretly reported his adopted father to the yamen and went to brush his clothes. Chapter 1. If you don't like to hold grudges, seek revenge immediately. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Dida, in the dark and damp dungeon, the sound of dripping water seeping through my ears was not pleasant. Mu walked in the hallway of the dungeon. He is 17 this year, with a beautiful appearance and agile eyes. He tightly purses his lips and breathes carefully. All kinds of rotten and moldy odors, passing through the nose, rush straight to the forehead. Roar. On the side, inside the iron fence of the prison cell, there was a thin, dog-like demon wolf with dark green eyes, staring at Mu and making threatening sounds from within his throat. Unfortunately, its 4 legs, along with its lumbar vertebrae, have been broken, and now it's just barely breathing. Mu casually threw a clean bone that had been bitten into it, and it landed right on the mouth of the demon wolf. The demon wolf licked its tongue, and the thick bone of its arm fell into its mouth. Its pair of oily green eyes still glared fiercely at Mu, biting it hard. Click, the sound of chewing bones was particularly crisp in this dungeon, as if it was chewing the bones on Mu's body. This bone was taken by him to make soup yesterday, and even the bone marrow inside was sucked clean. There's no way, it's so fragrant. No wonder this demon wolf hates itself so much. 3 days ago, my predecessor came to the dungeon to feed me, and there were still some tendons and a little bit of meat on the bones that were difficult to handle. Now, even my bone marrow is gone. 3 days ago, Mu was a good young man from the new century. He went to the hospital for a check-up due to chest tightness. When he walked out of the hospital gate, he was holding 10 yuan in his hand to prepare a bowl of mixed noodles and flat meat. However, a fortune-telling old man wearing sunglasses and pretending to be blind forcibly took him out of his hand. He then handed himself a low-quality yellow talisman, saying that he was covered in dark clouds and had a dead face. 10 yuan formed a good relationship and saved his life. Before he could react, the old fortune-teller was scared away by a passing urban management vehicle with 10 yuan in his hand, running at such a fast speed that he couldn't even tell he was blind. He was not only cursed, but also robbed. Mu returned home feeling depressed, lay down on the bed, closed his eyes, kicked his feet, and then opened it again, and he was already here. Great summer morning. Deyun City. Li Mansion. His predecessor, also known as Mu, was a deaf and mute teenager adopted by the butler of the Li family. Hurry up and let me out, kid. Do you know who my dad is? My father Zhang Donghe. In my ear, there was a faint threat, and the 5 words behind it grew longer and had a lingering charm. Mu arrived at the cell where the sound came from and casually placed the cold rice on the ground in front of the iron fence. Overnight dinner, I was even savored by cockroaches last night. A thin hand pierced through the gap in the iron railing, grabbed the rice bowl, and carried it to the prison cell. The other hand picked up the overnight meal and stuffed it directly into its mouth, starving. Ugh! The young man shouting, Father Zhang Donghe, retched and forcefully swallowed the food into his stomach. The food crawled by cockroaches always has a strange smell. Ugh! What kind of food is this? Even dogs don't eat it. Zhang Shifeng retched for a moment and cursed loudly, with an expression on her face similar to eating shit. Hey, you let me go, I'll take you to eat spicy food and drink spicy food, and play the top card at Qihong Tower. Zhang Shifeng moved to the iron railing, with a face that was so thin and disfigured that she desperately wanted to squeeze it out. Her eyes were small and white, staring straight at Li Mu. Li Muji seems to have ignored it. His predecessor was a deaf-mute, but after his soul pierced through, he was both deaf and mute. He remembered clearly that when he first came to the dungeon to deliver food, this guy who was shouting, "My father Zhang Donghe," cursed so harshly. "Hey, don't leave. Let's discuss. At least pour some soy sauce on top of this, you damn." Zhang Shifeng waved her hands like chicken feet, trying to grab Li Mu, but in vain. When she saw Li Mu walking away, she became even more angry and cursed loudly. "It's very dirty. Oh, he didn't add some aged phlegm or mix it with child urine in it. It's considered that he's being generous and still wants soy sauce. I want to eat my butt." The sound of wolfing down and retching came from behind. Li Mu chuckled in his heart. He didn't hold any grudges, so on the first day, he was startled by the sound of the demon wolf. He turned around and boiled the bones he had fed it into soup, even sucking up the bone marrow. Zhang Shifeng cursed profusely, so he stayed up late to catch cockroaches and put them in his food, and then brought them to him to eat. Nourishing the positive energy of heaven and earth, stored in the heart. Time sharpens, and the sharpness never tries. Who has caused injustice? Sword energy surges into the sky. Have you learned my sword cultivation technique? The voice was weak and powerless, but it carried a strong aura, as if it could really open its mouth and spit out a flying sword at any moment, the leader of the owl enemy. Qingyun Temple, Sword Cultivation. Zhang Xiaoyu. This is a world different from the past. In this world, there are sword cultivators and demons. Sword cultivation may not necessarily be chivalrous and righteous, but demons are truly cannibalistic. Li Mu silently took out 2 meat buns, a bowl of rice, topped with lard, a few green vegetables, and even a bowl of clear soup with tempting oil stars floating on top. Inside the prison cell, Zhang Xiaoyu's face turned pale. Originally handsome, he was now skinny and his right arm had disappeared without a trace. On both sides of the scapula, there is an iron chain passing through it. With a slight movement, the iron chain rubs against the flesh and bones, inevitably causing unimaginable pain. And his legs, rotting to the bone, could even be seen with white maggots wriggling, and some traces of rodents gnawing on them, just half soaking in the stinky water. In half a month, this sword cultivator, who was originally full of energy, became extremely haggard. However, even if he was struggling to survive in the book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com, that energy never disappeared. Thank you. Unfortunately, you are deaf and mute. Otherwise, if you learn my sword cultivation technique, you will have a chance to break away from evil spirits and become a normal person again in the future. You can be upright and upright. Zhang Xiaoyu was panting, with a smile still on his face. He struggled to move over, reached out to pick up the bowl of soup, and drank it all in one gulp. It could be seen that due to his movements, blood was flowing under the shoulder blades that were pierced by the chains, no longer bright, as if it was almost flowing light. Your soup is very delicious. I really should let my senior sister learn how to cook soup from you, instead of every time I cook soup, only charred meat and bones are left. When the soup is dry, I can only boil water and add it. Zhang Xiaoyu murmured, his eyes shining. Li Mu grinned and smiled at Zhang Xiaoyu, then turned around and left. What can he say? He is now deaf and mute. Between his heart and chest, there was a surge of sword energy, as if as soon as he spoke, frost and snow sword energy flew out. He practiced the sword cultivation technique and truly developed a sword energy in his heart. Li Mu walked towards the depths of the dungeon, where there were steps leading to the next level. I miss senior sister. I should listen to my senior sister and practice more. Zhang Xiaoyu was eating, murmuring softly, lost in thought. The darkness engulfed Li Mu's back. The second floor of the dungeon has a faint glow. A mouse darted out of nowhere and passed by Li Mu's feet. Suddenly, it lay on the ground, its limbs twitching and it quickly became motionless. Its skin and flesh withered at a visible speed, quickly turning into a rat trunk. It's like something intangible has sucked away the flesh and blood from its body. Chapter 2. This meal, even dogs don't eat it. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Li Mu's eyelids also twitched. The last place he wants to come is the second floor of this dungeon. Not only because, but also because creatures such as mice, cockroaches, and bats have mysteriously disappeared from their bodies. It's even more because, at the end of the second floor of the dungeon, the space suddenly widened. A statue covered in blood appeared before my eyes. From the memories of his predecessor, Li Mu knew that this statue, which was over 2 meters tall, had just been delivered and was carved entirely of flawless jade. He was a handsome middle-aged man in his early 40s, carrying the vicissitudes of time. His temperament was ethereal, with many subtle details that even made people think he was a living person. Now, layers of dried blood cover the entire statue, adding a lot of eerie blood and eerie elements. For half a month, I had to soak myself in fresh blood every day, and under the layers of coverage, I couldn't see the original appearance of this statue clearly. Li Mu is still a bit uncomfortable with the pungent and bloody smell. Carefully put down the beautifully decorated food box in your hand. Every time I see this face, I want to swallow it in one gulp and taste it well. A slightly hoarse seductive female voice sounded in her ear, with a strong desire in her tone. Li Muxin twitched slightly, but his face remained calm. He was now deaf and mute, unable to hear any sound. He pretended to be curious and fearful as he looked at the statue covered in blood in front of him. When he came to deliver the meal yesterday, he happened to hear something. Pouring blood on this statue is to defile a bit of the true spirit. He had heard of something really spiritual for the first time, and he didn't know what it was. It seemed extraordinary, and the original body of this statue was probably also extraordinary. If you really do this, Li Shoulin will have to go all out for you. He was recently blinded by the sword repair of Qingyun Temple and was planning to use these granulation eyes to replace himself. Another male voice sounded in his ear, carrying a deep chill. Li Mu's pupils contracted violently, enlarged suddenly, and soon returned to normal. He seems to have heard some incredible news. It concerns one's own life and death. In the memories left by his predecessor, there is some ambiguity, as if he was not originally deaf and mute. Li Shoulin is the butler of the Li family and also the adoptive father of Li Mu's predecessor. In Li Mu's mind, there are crazy memories. In front of me, 2 figures appeared and walked out of the darkness. One of them was a man in his early 40s, with an average appearance and figure. Apart from a pair of sinister eyes, he had no outstanding features and was quickly drowned out on the street, unrecognizable. The other person was a seductive young woman in her early 30s, with a thin veil covering her body, revealing a seductive silhouette that was faintly visible. Her exposed skin was as white as jade, especially the white flower-like valley in the middle, which seemed to trap the soul of a person. Li Mu's face turned red and his ears turned red, his eyes flickered, and he dared not look directly. He couldn't help but sneak a few glances. I really want to eat you in one bite. The seductive young woman was giggling and reaching out to touch Li Mu's face. The deep groove was almost touching his chest. Li Mu's heart was pounding, his face flushed as if it were a monkey's butt. He didn't know where to put his hands, and his eyes were subconsciously drooping. It's just a sprout. Beside him, the ordinary man sneered, with a pair of sinister eyes almost touching the seductive young woman's body. A few glances at Li Mu were filled with intense jealousy. The old man is just a waste. After a few days, he will take his eyes and I will go find him to come. With such a handsome face, it's a pity not to taste it. The seductive young woman spat and reached out to touch Li Mu's face. Li Mu has goosebumps all over his body, but he knows too well what eating means. On the first day after his travels, when he came down to deliver food, He saw a curled-up corpse in the corner, which had already transformed into a child of 3 or 5 years old. But in the memory of his predecessor, this corpse was over 1.9 meters tall, powerful, and burly. After being tasted by a seductive young woman, it shrank into this shape. He doesn't really want to be tasted. It's just a meat sprout that can be used up and thrown away. Silver like pewter spearhead. The ordinary man sneered. Li Mu forced an awkward and polite smile on his face, bent down to open the exquisite food box, took out the food inside, carefully helped put it on the nearby stone table, and then casually tidied up the dishes and chopsticks left behind yesterday. He then hurriedly walked out. Oh, the little one is actually shy. The seductive young woman stared at Li Mu's back, her pink tongue sticking out and lightly licking a circle of bright red lips, full of charm. The ordinary man instinctively swallowed his saliva as he watched. Half a month. This is the last word Li Mu heard. 1 layer of dungeon. What exactly do they want to do? Zhang Xiaoyu stared closely at Li Mu and asked in a deep voice. Li Mu silently tidied up the dishes without answering. He also wanted to know. He was grateful to Zhang Xiaoyu in his heart. If it weren't for the sword cultivation technique he taught, besides being able to cultivate a sword energy in his heart, he would also be able to silently transport his energy in blood, control his facial expression, and become blushing like shyness. He would also be able to briefly control his own heartbeat. I'm afraid I won't be able to conceal my true reaction in front of that seductive young woman and ordinary man, and it will be terrible then. After all, he is not an actor. Do you know who my father Zhang Donghe is? Deyun County Magistrate. Find Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, Zhang Shifeng, the son of the county magistrate. You just need to let me go, not to mention anything else. I can give you 300 taels of silver right away, take you to the Drunken Immortal Tower to eat and drink spicy food, and then go to the Qihong Tower to find Miss Miaoyu, play the flute and listen to music, so happy and joyful. It seemed that after eating enough, Zhang Shifeng had gained strength and lay behind the iron railing, making a proud promise to Li Mu. The sea bowl was licked clean, not even a single grain of rice was left. Li Mu silently put it away. Even if you don't let me go out, at least you can add some meat floss to the rice. If there's no meat floss, just pour some soy sauce on it. It's too bad to eat. In my house, even dogs don't eat this kind of food. Zhang Shifeng became indifferent to Li Mu and began to ramble on. Li Mu picked up his food box and walked away. Damn it, you deserve to be deaf and mute. You look better than this young master and it's useless. Have you ever seen Miaoyu play the flute? Zhang Shifeng's cursing is very unpleasant to listen to. After Li Mu planned to go up, he would catch more cockroaches and put them in the leftover food. It would be best to catch a few small mice and serve them some meat dishes to avoid excessive malnutrition. Passing by the cell where the demon wolf was being held, my footsteps paused for a moment. In the dungeon, the demon wolf's eyes drooped and he was already asleep. On the side, I didn't even see a bone stump, it was clean and tidy. Li Mu didn't stay much, the smell inside the dungeon was too unpleasant. Follow the long stone ladder and exit the dungeon. Outside the entrance, there is a fake mountain disguised as flowing water, surrounded by a pool of water where several koi fish roam. The dazzling sunlight shone on me, dispelling the chill all over me, and even the air became fresh. Chapter 3. Fulfilling the Order of Heaven. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, a tall and burly old man with gray hair turned around when he heard the footsteps of Li Mu. He covered his eyes with a black cloth and held a heavy cane in his hand, nodding slightly at Li Mu. Li Shoulin, the old butler of Li Mansion. Half a month ago, I was blinded by Zhang Xiaoyu's sword breath from the mouth. Of course, Zhang Xiaoyu's own fate was also tragic. He was severely disabled and locked in a dungeon, struggling to survive until death. Li Mu's heart tightened. Previously, he may not have had a deep understanding, but that ordinary man's words made him start to recall some memories left by his predecessor. Meat sprouts don't sound like a good word. The key is that the predecessor was not born deaf and mute. As for how to become deaf-mute, my predecessor is not very clear either. It seems like I had a serious illness and my memory is very blurry, probably at the age of 9 or 10. 6 or 7 years have passed. Li Shoulin just waved his hand and asked Li Mu to leave on his own. He lived in a nearby room, mainly to prevent those who didn't have long eyes from finding the entrance to the dungeon. Li Mu bent down slightly towards Li Shoulin before quickly leaving with his food box. It will take 3 more days for the sword energy remaining in the eyes to be completely dispelled. Then I can see the light again. The sword cultivation at Qingyun Temple is troublesome and cannot be killed directly. Otherwise, the sword intent inside his body will dissipate and he will be approached immediately, causing an accident. Li Shoulin murmured, blindfolded by black cloth, but looked at Li Mu's back as if he was not blind yet and could still see something. Li Mu walked non-stop without any abnormality and quickly disappeared on the other side of the arch. After returning to his room and closing the door tightly, he finally relaxed completely. What did he mean by that? He suspected me. Otherwise, how could I suddenly mutter to myself? Li Mu collapsed on the bed, sweating profusely. After relaxing, he felt a deep fatigue. In the past few days, Li Shoulin was silent and reserved, how could he possibly murmur to himself behind him? 3 days. If according to that ordinary man's statement, what kind of flesh sprouts are they? When their eyes are dug out and placed on Li Shoulin, he will see the light again, and then he will become blind. Deaf, mute, and blind. Oh, I'm not deaf-mute now. He also doesn't want to become blind. Li Mu closed his eyes slightly, then opened them again. With each grip and release, he only saw a yellow talisman appearing in his palm. That's right, this is the old fortune teller who pretended to be blind. After grabbing 10 yuan from himself, he stuffed the inferior yellow talisman into his hand and followed him through the journey. Or rather, the reason why I died and traveled through time is because of this yellow talisman. Before crossing over, the material of this yellow talisman was no different from the paper money burned to ancestors during the Qingming festival, as if it would shatter with just a rub. Nowadays, it has a jade-like luster. On the back, there is a slightly distorted black seal character. On the front, there is a vermilion imperial edict letter at the top, with the letter EP1-10 hanging directly from both sides to the bottom. In the center of the letter EP1-10, there are 4 characters written. Obey heaven's orders. Li Mu's mouth twitched slightly. Even if he wrote, follow the heavens and carry the fortune, and pretended to be a decree, it was much more reliable than that. He heard Zhang Xiaoyu's sword cultivation technique 2 days ago, the first day of his journey, and after firmly memorizing it, he returned to his own room to practice. After concentrating, he discovered the yellow talisman. With spiritual concentration, he could appear in his hands without knowing where his body was. Then, he still doesn't know what other uses this yellow talisman has besides allowing himself to travel through it. There is neither an instruction manual nor a heartwarming system prompt that reminds you how to use it. It's like the cheat has expired, only responsible for taking you on a journey, and then owing money, you don't know where to renew it. Hit. Li Mu clenched his fist, then let go, and the yellow talisman had already disappeared. Do you want to report to the police? Zhang Shifeng is the only son of Zhang Donghe, the magistrate of Deyun County. He was arrested and imprisoned in a dungeon a month ago. My predecessor also saw the missing person notice posted by the county government. Unfortunately, Zhang Donghe was unable to mobilize the demon control department. Li Mu felt a bit regretful in his heart. If Zhang Donghe could mobilize the power of the demon control department, he would not hesitate to report to the official. Of course, he would not go in his current identity, disguise himself, and hide after reporting to the official to avoid being caught and killed. The Demon Control Department is an independent organization under the jurisdiction of the Great Summer Dynasty, independent of the bureaucratic system. It is mainly responsible for slaying demons and eliminating demons, and all of them are cultivators with strong cultivation skills. There is also a Demon Control Bureau in Deyun City. However, ordinary people do not have the qualification to connect to the location of the nearby demon lord. If they dare to forcefully approach, they may even be killed directly. The Zhenhua Department has its own independent system, which is not under the jurisdiction of the Deyun County Magistrate and will not accept reports from ordinary people, but rather acts independently. The main responsibility of the Demon Control Bureau is to slay demons and eliminate them, not to protect the environment and the people. That is the responsibility of the county government. Especially, most ordinary people cannot distinguish what a demon is. What is magic? What is demon trouble? Therefore, the result of indiscriminate reporting is that the Demon Control Department is exhausted. The Demon Control Department of the Great Xia Dynasty, among which the strong are like clouds, and there are countless cultivators. However, in the summer, the territory of the court was vast and scattered throughout, resulting in a shortage of manpower. Therefore, generally weaker demons rely on the power of county officials or other practitioners to deal with them. Zhaozhuyuan.com The Demon Control Department is mainly responsible for powerful demons, ghosts, and cultivators of evil spirits and heretics. As for the Qingyun Temple where Zhang Xiaoyu is located, I don't know where it is. Definitely not in Deyun City. Therefore, this choice can be completely ruled out. He cannot ask Zhang Xiaoyu how to contact Qingyun Temple. That's completely seeking death. On the second floor of the dungeon, there is a seductive young woman and an ordinary man, whose cultivation level is unknown. Who knows if they will run to the first floor of the dungeon, and the cat is secretly peeping. On the ground, there is Li Shoulin sitting there. In the end, I can only rely on myself. Li Mu took a deep breath. The good news is that Li Shoulin is blind, and after practicing the sword cultivation technique, he has already developed a sword energy. The power is unknown. The bad news is that Zhang Xiaoyu, who taught himself the art of raising swords, was disabled by Li Shoulin. My sword energy can only have an unexpected effect. My predecessor was brought back by Li Shoulin and had no relatives. At around the age of 10, I became deaf and mute. Even if there were familiar people within the Li mansion, they had already moved out 3 months ago. In the city of Deyun, there were no familiar people who could help me. The owner of the Li mansion, Mr. Li, moved his family to the county town 3 months ago, leaving only Li Shoulin and Li Mu to look at the huge mansion. That demon wolf was only sent to the dungeon after Mr. Li's family moved out. Then a month ago, Zhang Shifeng was thrown into the dungeon with her legs broken. Half a month ago, Zhang Xiaoyu followed the statue, seductive young woman, an ordinary man, but was seriously injured by Li Shoulin and thrown into the dungeon. Along with the statue and those 2 people, they were all sent to the dungeon together. Chapter 4. Stealth Reporting and Righteous Destruction of Relatives. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Li Mu took a deep breath, got out of bed, pushed open the door, and walked out. The sunset is setting in the west, and the last bit of afterglow is about to fade away. Anyway, take it as it comes, and first find a way to survive in this world where demons run rampant. Practice. My predecessor, under the guidance of Li Shoulin since childhood, has been practicing a boxing technique. Wufang Beast Fist. Imitate 5 forms of fierce beasts to achieve a strong physical effect, and can also be used against enemies. 5 fierce beasts. Tigers, leopards, lions, bears, and horses. Li Muqi initially thought something was wrong. What kind of beast is a horse? But when I think of the wild horse's split mane technique and the word fierce horse, it can indeed be considered one of the fierce beasts. Beast-shaped fist, rumored to have 12 animal shapes, but most of the other parts have been lost. Standing like a horse, standing like a bear, majestic like a tiger, fierce like a lion, and moving like a cheetah. Having a combination of stance, momentum, and body techniques, it can temper and strengthen muscles, bones, skin, and flesh. After cultivation, the skin is as tough as old cowhide, the muscles have explosive power like tigers and lions, and the tendons are as strong as bowstrings, exuding a majestic and fierce aura. After completing the cultivation of the Wufang Beast Fist, I was sweating profusely all over. The setting sun was completely engulfed by darkness. Li Mu let out a sigh and his gaze fell on his sweaty arm. This body is much younger, healthier, and more powerful than my own sub-healthy body in my previous life. He didn't immediately return to his own room, but instead went to the nearby kitchen, casually took off his sweat-soaked clothes, threw them aside, revealing his relatively strong muscles, and then scooped himself a bowl of bone soup from the still warm stove. The bone inside is tomorrow's feast for the demon wolf. Cool. Li Mu whispered in his heart. He is now very cautious and dare not speak, even when he is alone. Then he added some charcoal to the stove, enough to burn until tomorrow, which was the end. He wanted to boil out every drop of essence in this big bone. Li Mu had already discovered that the large bones he took out of the Li Mansion ice cellar were likely not ordinary pig or cow bones, but monster bones. In just 2 or 3 days, he only drank the soup cooked by Dagu and sucked in some bone marrow, and his physical body had significantly improved. In wealthy households, the food is naturally not ordinary. Anyway, Mr. Li's whole family has moved to the county town. Feeding the demon wolf is too wasteful, it's better to use it to enhance oneself. Then he filled himself with a bowl of rice and started eating bone soup in large bites. After finishing all the food and drinks, Li Mu walked out of the door and fetched water from the nearby well. He washed it thoroughly before returning to his room and putting on clean clothes. As for Li Shoulin's side, there is no need to go and deliver food. In the dungeon, you only need to deliver a meal once a day, with the main theme of never dying from hunger. Li Mu sat cross-legged on the bed. His room was small and originally a relatively remote location in the Li Mansion, belonging to the residence of servants and servants. Mr. Li's whole family moved away, and most of the servants followed suit. Now the entire Li Mansion is empty, leaving only him and Li Shoulin, as well as the few unseen people in the dungeon. Originally, Li Mu could easily find a more spacious and comfortable room to live in. However, as his soul had just passed through, he remained cautious and lived in a familiar place from his predecessor. Nourishing the positive energy of heaven and earth, stored in the heart. Time sharpens, and the sharpness never tries. Who has caused injustice? Sword energy surges into the sky. Li Mu closed his eyes tightly and silently recited the secret of cultivating swords in his heart. He could only feel a sword energy constantly swimming back and forth between his chest, accompanied by his recitation of the secret, rapidly growing. As Zhang Xiaoyu muttered to himself, the first realm of cultivation is the quenching of the body, the skin, flesh, muscles, and bones, reaching deep into the bone marrow, transforming the whole body's blood, and strengthening qi in blood. It is divided into 3 sub-realms. First the skin and flesh, then the 5 organs and 6 organs, and finally the muscles and bones. Only by reaching the second level of cultivation. Practicing qi, can one be considered as an entry-level practitioner. They can absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth into the body, refine it into their own true qi, and when they make a move, their power doubles. I can only be considered as a quenched body state now, and even as a little adult, not to mention the 5 organs and 6 organs of great adult and the peak muscles and bones. In theory, there is no true qi in the body, so don't think about practicing any sword qi. However, this sword cultivation technique was obtained by Zhang Xiaoyu's own accidental encounter. The sword moves off course, and even an ordinary person can cultivate a sword energy by silently reciting the mnemonic. At critical moments, they can spray sword energy to kill enemies, and the move is unexpected. As for the size of the power, it all depends on one's talent and fate. Li Mu's mind was filled with thoughts, but he quickly restrained himself and continued to cultivate the sword energy in his heart. One night until dawn. Li Mu opened his eyes, jumped out of bed, and moved his slightly stiff and numb hands, feet, and body to allow qi and blood to circulate before continuing to practice the 5 directions beast fist. It wasn't until I was drenched in sweat that I went to fetch water and take a shower. I went to the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com and cooked porridge with bone soup, which was delicious. It's time to go buy some groceries this morning. By the way, go to the yamen gate and take a look. Li Mu thought to himself. Anyway, the conversation between the dog man and woman on the 2nd floor of the dungeon had already alerted him, and he absolutely did not want to become blind. From the memories of his predecessor, Li Shoulin treated him quite well. He adopted him from a young age, raised him through hard work, and even taught him the 5 directions beast fist to strengthen his body and health. However, around the age of 10, for 4 or 5 months, my previous memory was blurred, and later I only remembered a serious illness, and then I became deaf and mute. The key is that Li Shoulin did not teach his predecessor the true cultivation techniques. The Wufang beast fist is only used to refine the body and strengthen its qi and blood. Don't think about practicing the qi realm later. The most important thing is, even if Li Shoulin has the grace to raise his predecessor, what is it to do with him as a traveler? 3 days. Cannot be completely taken seriously, at most only 2 days. That is to say, I only have today and tomorrow's time left. Although the words of that dog man and woman cannot be fully believed, Li Shoulin's collusion with them and his daily use of blood to drench the statue clearly indicate that he is not a good person. I went to the yamen, even the Demon Control Bureau, to hold a ceremony, which can be considered as a righteous act of annihilating relatives and eliminating harm to the people. Li Mu secretly realized that there was not much time left for him. Fortunately, Li Shoulin seems to be really at ease with Li Mu. He can naturally enter and exit the Li mansion without having to seek any advice. Even if I go to Gulan to listen to music, I still have a lot of silver on my body, which is enough to listen for 10 days and a half a month. Go out and buy groceries. By the way, find a way to host your own foster father. Chapter 5. The Appearance of Senior Sister. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Li Mansion. In the 5th floor attic. Li Shoulin's eyes were covered in black cloth, but he looked towards the direction of Li Mu's mansion, with a chilling smile on his lips. Li Mu was unaware of everything behind him. After leaving the Li mansion, walked towards the west of Deyun City. Deyun City is not very large, and its permanent population is only over 10,000 people, not considered prosperous. Named a city, it is actually more similar to a town in a previous life. However, because in this world, demons run rampant and without city walls to protect them, they can be attacked by monsters at any time, even slaughtering villages and exterminating tribes, so they gather together. The 5 streets crisscrossing the city are the entirety of Deyun City. From afar, one can already see the somewhat dilapidated Changsheng County Government Office, with 2 weak and black-eyed yamen guards standing at the entrance. I wonder if they stayed up all night watching. Li Mu only glanced from a distance and did not approach, but turned towards another street. Not long after leaving, there was a clamor in my ear and a smell of rotting vegetable leaves and bloody flesh in my nose. A vegetable vendor greeted Li Mu. This is the vegetable market in Deyun City. Most of the people in the city come here to buy groceries. Of course, in the past, Li Mansion used to have a dedicated person deliver them to their doorstep, but now they naturally don't have this treatment anymore. Li Mu wore a smile on his face, picked several dishes he liked, and even bought a fish. On the way back, passing through the county government office, the yamen guard at the entrance had already been replaced. The Demon Control Bureau is within the county government office, and even if they want to go to Gaohei, they must first go through the inspection of the yamen at the entrance of the county government office. He even felt that the strength of these yamen runners was not as strong as his own. In addition to the county magistrate Zhang Donghe, there was also a county magistrate, Li Heishui, who was a distant relative of Mr. Li. Afterwards, he became 2 constables and more than a dozen yamen guards and constables. Such a large number of people is more than enough to manage a county magistrate of over 10,000 people. As for the Demon Control Bureau, there are only 3 people rumored to be there, but each one is at least a strong figure above the Zhou Tian realm, far from being comparable to a constable or a yamen runner. Li Mu let out a sigh in his heart. Zhang Xiaoyu has been delivering meals on his own for the past 3 days, either reciting the sword cultivation technique or asking what the second floor of the dungeon is doing. Or when it comes to one's own strength, what is the enlightened state of the universe? As I was about to leave, I only saw the county government gate open, dressed in red, and standing tall and graceful, even giving a sharp feeling. Subconsciously, I overlooked her relatively ordinary appearance and was unconsciously attracted to her past. The person accompanying the woman in red was Li Heishui, the county magistrate of Deyun, with a pleasing smile on his face. Li Mu was stunned for a moment, only feeling the sword energy between his chest. He jumped violently, and his lips trembled. He almost opened his mouth to spit it out, but was immediately forcefully suppressed by him. The woman in red clothes seemed to notice and looked up at Li Mu. As soon as Li Mucai suppressed the sword energy in his heart, he only saw a flower in front of him. The woman in red clothes had already appeared in front of him, and he was so frightened that he let go of his hand. The vegetables he had bought scattered all over the ground, along with the lively fish, almost fell into the foul-smelling ditch nearby. Li Mu pretended to be in a hurry to catch fish. But one hand was faster than him, already lifting the grass rope that tied the fish and handing it back to him. Li Mu panicked and reached out to take it. Have you ever seen him? After returning the fish to Li Mu, Lu Hongshang reached out and took out a portrait of Zhang Xiaoyu. Compared to Zhang Xiaoyu, who is now haggard, pale, and struggling, this portrait appears full of vitality. Li Mu looked at Lu Hongshang with a bewildered expression, but his heart slightly skipped as he thought of Zhang Xiaoyu's self-talk. The senior sister who stewed the soup until it was dry and the bones were burnt, then added boiling water to it. This kid is deaf and mute. He can't hear your voice or speak. It's no use asking him. Li Heishui interjected beside him. His own strength is not inferior, but it is obvious that he is not on par with Lu Hongshang. He looked at Li Mu with a look of disdain. He often visits Mr. Li at the Li Mansion and has also met Li Mu. He knows the appearance of this Li Mansion butler, who is deaf and mute. Unfortunately, this looks great. If sent to the brothel, I wonder how many people are willing to spend money. Deaf-mute. Lu Hongshang looked at Li Mu, who looked bewildered and panicked, and was also somewhat surprised. Well, the appearance of our former wealthy household butler in Deyun City was like a child who fell seriously ill and then became deaf and mute. This time, Mr. Li's whole family moved to the county town. The butler Li is getting older and unwilling to leave his hometown. Even this boy was left behind to help take care of his elderly. Li Heishui said casually. Lu Hongshang had a thoughtful expression on her face. This kid, besides staying at home, only goes to the market to buy groceries. It's impossible to have met your junior brother. Li Heishui added a sentence before impatiently waving to Li Mu and urging him to leave quickly. Li Mulu gave an awkward and polite smile, carrying vegetables and fish, and hurriedly walked towards the Li mansion. Lu Hongshang looked at Li Mu's back and frowned slightly. Miss Lu, your junior brother is likely passing by our Deyun City and is looking for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. He probably left again. Why don't you wait a few more days? I'll have my subordinates go ask and see. As long as he's still here, someone must have seen him. Li Heishui said. Lu Hongshang just nodded lightly, a hint of doubt flashed in her heart. Did she feel the wrong way? Li Heishui saw Lu Hongshang's expression and just sneered in his heart. What is the use of a deaf-mute, no matter how beautiful he looks? I'm not sure which day I'll be dragged into the dark alley. Women, no matter how strong they are, still like to look at their faces. After returning to the Li mansion, Li Mu tightly closed the door and his heart began to beat violently. Sweating profusely all over, it's even more tiring than practicing the 5 directions beast fist 180 times. Just now, he suddenly realized that Lu Hongshang was the senior sister in Zhang Xiaoyu's mouth. He clearly wanted to speak up and reveal Zhang Xiaoyu's whereabouts. However, for some reason, in the end, he didn't say a word and pretended to be deaf-mute, panicking and fleeing. Calm down, calm down. In the face of great events, there is still breath. The reason why I don't do this is entirely because I don't know how strong the senior sister is, what is the strength of Li Shoulin and those 2 demons. If Master Sister is not their opponent, then I will be exposed and die. When we go to deliver food in the afternoon, let's find a way to ask Zhang Xiaoyu, how is senior sister's strength? Then, find a way to secretly send messages to the senior sister. Well, at that time, I definitely couldn't stay at home. Li Mu secretly thought to himself that he had already made a decision. Chapter 6. Hunger for a day cannot die. You are listening at novelfull.audio. De Co Lois Ara Trong Quatrin Lay Text. Chapter 7. Exposes shortcomings because cooking is too delicious. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Li Mu's heart was beating, and if not heard, he continued to eat the already cold fried fish belly. However, the pupils contracted violently, and cold sweat came down from the forehead. At the same time, the mind was spinning wildly. He doesn't even know when Li Shoulin will appear. Or always following behind oneself. What does Li Shoulin mean by this? I thought you were a little strange these days. Maybe it was just a change of mind, but it's not strange. Young people, there will always be a few days. Li Shoulin continued. Li Mu seemed to have not heard any sound and was still eating fried fish belly. He really doubted me. In Li Mu's mind, the speculation from yesterday came to mind. He had eaten a fish bone. However, when I went down just now, Yuji said that the food you sent over in the past 3 days has become increasingly delicious. I knew you had a problem. Li Shoulin continued, blindfolded with black cloth, looking down at Li Mu sitting on a small stool with his back to eat fried fish belly. Yuji, she should be the young woman on the 2nd floor of the dungeon, with an unfathomable groove in her chest. Can you tell if I'm having a problem with the delicious food? Li Mu was a bit confused in his mind, so much so that he forgot that when he fried the fish belly himself, he had already removed all the fish bones. He didn't have his mind wandering around. How to cook and stir-fry delicious food is also guilty, right? In my memory, my predecessor, no taste buds. It should have been lost together with when I was deaf and mute. Li Mu felt numb all over, and now he understood why Li Shoulin didn't want to eat the dishes stir-fried from his predecessor before. How delicious can stir-fried dishes be for someone who has lost their sense of taste since around the age of 10? Perhaps only those who have eaten it know best. Li Mu just wants to curse at his father now. Although he inherited the memories of his predecessor, it felt like he was reading a book where a certain plot could not be remembered without careful recollection. Moreover, the predecessor did not realize that he had lost his sense of taste. 5 senses deprivation not only deprives you of hearing, but also of taste, which is why you become deaf and mute. In theory, for those who have been deprived of their 5 senses, it is absolutely impossible for them to recover from the deprivation, unless you take away someone else's 5 senses and complete yourself. Li Shoulin continued. Li Mu only felt his mind buzzing. Who could have thought that he was already so careful, or that he was planting because the cooking was too delicious. At the same time, my heart was also filled with immense horror. My predecessor did not become deaf or mute due to some serious illness, but was deprived of hearing and taste. Just say it, my tongue and ears are intact, and I dug out a lot of earwax the day before yesterday. Why did I inexplicably become deaf and mute? No wonder the memories left by our predecessors were so vague. Even during that period, they were passive. In an instant, Li Mu's muscles tightened all over his body. Then, he forcefully kicked his feet and fiercely leaned towards Li Shoulin behind him. Wufang Beast Fist. Bear Backrest. This is created by imitating a bear hitting a big tree with its back, with unparalleled power. However, Li Mu only felt a loosening of his back, and then his neck was pinched, his body was lifted up in the air, and the sword energy between his heart and chest could not be exhaled because it was choked on Fate's neck. Forcefully spraying sword energy is likely to pierce one's own neck first. He doesn't want to wipe his neck and commit suicide yet. Did you learn the 5 senses deprivation technique yourself? I think, when I was a child, I taught you how to read and read. Oh, during that time, you were all in my room, maybe you flipped through it. Oh, no wonder I feel like something's wrong with you these days. Li Shoulin chuckled, his laughter eerie and eerie. Li Musho kicked and kicked, but was immediately shaken by Li Shoulin, his hands and feet sore and weak, and he had no strength left. My eyes were also turning black in waves. At the same time, subconsciously, it occurred to me that in my past life, when I saw a person catching a snake, I would grab its tail and shake it casually, and the snake would no longer struggle. I am the snake that was shaken by someone. I won't die shortly after wearing it, will I? A big joke flashed through Li Mu's mind. That's really too tragic. He wants to summon the godly mandate symbol and give it a final try. Coincidentally, my eyes were injured by that small sword repair, depriving you of both sight and touch. All your senses have been restored, so let's do it together. He. In the past 2 years, I feel increasingly powerless. Li Shoulin chuckled, his face gloomy, his eyes covered in black cloth, and a red light penetrated through them. The headache is splitting. Not dead. Or did you wear it again? Li Mu opened his eyes and saw darkness before him. Has my vision been deprived? In an instant of panic, Li Mu forced himself to calm down. Wake up. Li Shoulin's voice rang in his ears. Suddenly, Li Mu calmed down, and then his heart lifted again. Then, the oil lamp lit up, and under the dim light, Li Shoulin stood beside him, his eyes still covered in black cloth. At the tip of the nose, a strong bloody smell came from it. Compared to being on the 2nd floor of the dungeon, the smell next to the statue is even more intense. Zhaozuiyuan.com, it turned out to be dark. Li Mu didn't know why, but he instinctively breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Then he realized that his whole body was sore and soft, as if he had been grabbed by his neck and shaken. His muscles, bones, skin, and flesh were all scattered and hadn't recovered yet. Immediately after, he saw that Li Shoulin casually reached out and lifted himself away. He just saw that not far in front of him were chickens, ducks, geese, 3 poultry, and 2 fat pigs, all slaughtered and placed on the altar, blood dripping profusely and dripping onto the ground. The fur on their bodies did not fade away, and even the throats of chickens, ducks, and geese made a gurgling sound. The 2 fat pigs also made a sound, but they were not completely dead. On the altar, there is a statue that is over a foot tall, with a turquoise-green body and an astonishingly large head without any hair. However, it has 5 faces, 4 of which are missing an organ. The eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. The 5th face in the center, without any missing organs, but for some reason, gives a feeling of incompleteness. Evil gods. Li Mu's pupils contracted violently. The statue in front of me looks neither serious nor eerie. Not like orthodox gods, but more like some legendary evil gods. One of the most important responsibilities of the demon control department of the Great Xia dynasty is to eliminate all those who worship evil gods and sections. Just by looking at the 5 faces of this evil god statue, one can know that it must be related to the deprivation of the 5 senses. Damn it! In Li Mu's mind, there were countless images that flashed like lightning. When his predecessor was still young, he was casually placed on the altar by Li Shoulin, and then blood poured down his body. Chapter 8. Who has unfair matters? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, nourishing the positive energy of heaven and earth, stored in the heart. Time sharpens, and the sharpness never tries. Who has caused injustice? Sword energy surges into the sky. Li Mu opened his mouth and saw only a white light spurting out. Amazing sword intent, accompanied by it, pierced Li Shoulin's eyebrows. This is not the sword energy nurtured in the heart by the sword cultivation technique, but a true flying sword. A flying sword belonging to Zhang Xiaoyu. Inspired by the sword energy of the sword cultivation technique. Li Shoulin's pupils contracted violently, wanting to avoid them, but the distance between the two was too close, within a short distance, and he never expected that Li Mu also had the same ability as Zhang Xiaoyu. It was useless when he counterattacked before, but he has stayed until now. The flying sword flashed white light, instantly piercing into the center of the eyebrows, flying out from the back of the head, breaking through the window, and flying without knowing where it had gone. This is Zhang Xiaoyu's flying sword, not Li Mu's flying sword. It can be triggered entirely because of Zhang Xiaoyu's own permission, not Li Mu's strength, and it has reached this level. Therefore, after stimulation, it was completely beyond the control of Li Mu. In the afternoon, Zhang Xiaoyu didn't eat the fried fish belly alone. Li Mu had already noticed something suspicious, so when he returned to the kitchen, he immediately picked up the fried fish belly and started eating it. The fish bones inside this fried fish belly have already been removed by him, how could there be any more? Previously, Li Shoulin acted too quickly, and Li Mu didn't even have time to exhale the sword energy that was nurtured in his heart by the sword cultivation technique. After all, he was facing Li Shoulin with his back, and later he was choked by Fate's neck. Spraying the sword energy was completely a suicidal act of wiping his neck. This toothpick-like flying sword stayed in my mouth. After waking up, silently reciting the sword cultivation technique, the sword energy in my heart surged, but it was like a flying sword with a toothpick in my mouth, forming a connection, which is why I had this flying sword so close at hand. This flying sword was originally one of the trumps that Zhang Xiaoyu had not had time to use before, and it was also his hope for escape. However, after learning that his master sister Lu Hongshang had arrived, he did not hesitate to hide it inside the fried fish belly and let Li Mu take it back. Speaking of which, Zhang Xiaoyu's action can also be considered audacious. Li Mu felt his grip on himself release. Bang! Li Mu fell to the ground, feeling sore and limp all over. He struggled forcefully and grabbed the legs of the table next to him to climb up. My body is still trembling. Turning his head to look at Li Shoulin, he found that his hands were hanging down and not falling down, but there was a slight blush in his eyebrows. It was a drop of blood, which seemed to be dead. Li Mugan didn't dare to neglect, he didn't know how strong Li Shoulin's realm was. What if that flying sword pierced through the brain and didn't die? My gaze turned and I wanted to find something suitable to smash Li Shoulin's head. What's the matter with his adoptive father, who doesn't have an adoptive father? It's a matter of his predecessor. What's the matter with him as a traveler? Quickly kill Li Shoulin, and then run to the yamen to report the case at night, or find Lu Hongshang to save his own life, which is the most serious thing. Unconsciously, my gaze swept over the 1-foot-tall 5-faced evil god statue. In the next moment, Li Mu clearly felt that his gaze was as if someone had glued it to him, staring firmly at the 5-faced evil gods, unable to move away. Li Mu's pupils contracted violently, and he only felt that the 5 faces of the evil god seemed to have come to life, constantly approaching his own eyes, and getting bigger and bigger. The originally blurry 5 faces became clearer and clearer. Evil gods. He now understands why he is called an evil god. This world is far more dangerous than he imagined. Despite being just a eerie statue, it possesses a heart-wrenching power. Unfortunately, at the age of 10, my predecessor was deprived of hearing and taste, resulting in being deaf and mute. Although I could read, I lived in the Li mansion for more than a decade. Occasionally, when I went out, I couldn't speak or hear others speak, which made my predecessor's knowledge shallow. It could even be said that it was completely blank paper. Perhaps my knowledge was not as good as some of the little girls in the Li mansion before. Li Mu only wanted to curse his mother. The identity he had traveled through was not right, and the time was too short. He didn't have time to understand the dangers of this world. Whispering sounded in my ear, and I saw those 5 faces. Except for the one without a mouth, they actually spoke with a strange and gloomy smile on their faces, talking and laughing as if discussing something. Even the eyeless face was facing Li Mu, with its nostrils constantly moving, as if smelling something delicious. Nourishing heaven and earth's positive qi. Li Mu only felt that his thoughts had slowed down, and even the mnemonic of silently reciting the sword cultivation technique seemed extremely difficult. Bite your teeth, desperately gather your spirit, silently recite the sword cultivation technique, and at the same time call out the heaven-accepting mandate. Between the heart and chest, sword energy condenses. Previously, the sword energy cultivated by this sword cultivation technique stimulated Zhang Xiaoyu's flying sword, but it did not completely dissipate. With his concentrated spirit, it gathered again and went to the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com. However, its power was nearly twice that of before. Grasp your palms tightly, exert all your strength, and suddenly lift them up. Your palms are about to spread out, and you need to stick this Fengtian Shoming talisman onto the intact face among the 5 evil gods. No matter whether it is useful or not, never give up on any hope. In previous lives, yellow talismans had various uses such as warding off evil and suppressing evil. The 5 evil gods in front of me are the greatest evil. This may be the most correct usage of this Fengtian Shoming talisman. I never expected that the little sword cultivator at Qinyan Temple would hide such a small flying sword, and he would trust you so much, even handing over this last card to you. I never expected that. When did you cultivate such a skill? Is that the Qinyan Temple sword cultivator who taught you? Indeed, it is truly a natural spiritual body. Even after so many years of acquired dirt, it still has extraordinary talent. Li Shoulin's cold voice came from behind, with endless resentment in his words. Li Mu's heart sank as he listened, his hand trembled, and the talisman of Fengtian Qingming was crooked. However, the whispers in my ear that I couldn't hear clearly weakened, and along with the 5 faces in front of me, they also became slightly blurry. However, Li Mu found that his gaze was still firmly attracted by the 5-faced evil god, his body stiff and uncontrollable. This Fengtian Shoming talisman is somewhat useful, but not very useful. The most crucial thing is that even Li Shoulin's flying sword pierced through his brain and he hasn't died yet. Do you belong to cockroaches? Also, Zhang Xiaoyu, can't your flying sword be any stronger? Li Mu was filled with grief and anger in his heart, feeling that he had died. Chapter 9. Respectfully invites the arrival of Emperor Wugan. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. De Co Lois Ara Trong Quatrin Lay Text. Chapter 10. Borrowing a Moonlight as Sword Light. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Yuji pursed her lips, but there was still a serious expression in her eyes. These types don't even have a name, they are just a nickname based on their own abilities. They are all this emperor and that queen, which sounds very scary, but in fact, they are all evil gods with no origin. Most of them are abilities obtained unintentionally and then known by others. For example, the five senses emperor in front of her, Yuji first heard of it from Li Shoulin. My ability is quite strong. I can deprive people of five senses and attach them to another person, allowing a deaf, mute, or blind person to speak again, hear sounds, and see light again. Of course, it can also make people deaf, mute, and blind, such as the predecessor of Li Mu. These types of evil gods can be traded, and traders will inevitably lose something, whether it is their lifespan, their organs, or their senses. But when it comes to strength, this five senses emperor, even Li Shoulin and Li Daitao are stiff, unable to detect the use of a dead pig's five senses to replace his own. Even if he has strength, he is not much stronger. Of course, it is not easy for such evil gods to develop into believers, especially those who have the ability to provide blood and food. They are very rare and often respond to requests, and the cost is relatively small. This old thing is too cautious. Yuji's gaze fell on Li Shoulin. Even if the transaction cost was small, Li Shoulin was unwilling to pay, so she replaced her five senses with the dead pig's facial features. Even if the transaction price was charged by the five senses emperor, it still did not belong to her. The cunning are a bit cautious. At this moment, Li Shoulin's eyebrows slightly furrowed. Because of this action, his eyebrows only knew the wound, and a little blood seeped out. It seems that something is wrong. Tonight, the reaction of the five senses emperor was somewhat slow and hazy, as if someone had applied a layer of cloth. The whispers in Li Mu's ear suddenly became clear. These ears are young and have good hearing. These eyes have only been fresh for 17 years. This nose is really sharp, it's really sharp. This skin is really soft. The one who speaks of the ears is the face without ears, the one who speaks of the eyes is the face without eyes, the one who speaks of the nose is the face without a nose, and the one who speaks of the skin is the face with complete facial features. Only the face without a face, which is covered by the divine mandate, is trembling wildly, eager to speak, but powerless, and even sweating profusely. Li Mu also looked shocked. This thing is simply too cult. Nourishing heaven and earth's positive chi. Li Mu couldn't close his eyes and stared at the five faces, getting closer and closer. It feels like I went to the market to buy meat before, leaned in front of the pork and looked and smelled to determine if it was fresh. Now, I am the fresh pork. Reciting the sword cultivation technique silently in my heart, the sword energy converges between my chest and condenses into shape. Whether it works or not depends on the current situation. Li Mu thought to himself, the flying sword didn't kill Li Shoulin before, but now there's only one sword energy left. Let's see if we can break this 1-foot-tall five-faced evil god statue. At the same time, he clearly saw that the chicken blood, duck blood, goose blood, and pig blood on the table were mixed together, with a foul smell, but were directly divided into three parts. One part covered his face, the other climbed up to the five faces of the five faces evil god statue, and the last part floated out of thin air. After seeing the face formed by the convergence of blood, Li Shoulin also breathed a slight sigh of relief in his heart. Although his reaction was slightly slow, we can't wait anymore. A fierce and desperate expression flashed in Li Mu's eyes, and his lips trembled as he was about to open and exhale sword energy. He absolutely cannot let this dirty blood cling to his face. That will definitely bring about very unpleasant things. Yuji widened her eyes, feeling that the scene before her was both comical and eerie, so it's hidden here. A cold and crisp female voice sounded out of thin air. What kind of demon is hiding here to harm people? Today, I will act on behalf of the heavens and slay your group of demons and evil spirits, restoring a clear sky and earth. The sound exploded like thunder. While the contaminated blood, which was originally divided into three parts, was replaced on the altar and merged into one. Li Shoulin's face suddenly turned extremely fierce and terrifying, with a look of fear on his face amidst his impatience and frustration. What kind of sword cultivator from Qingyun Temple do you want to provoke, you naughty hoof? There's a lot of trouble now. Come with me and kill this sword cultivator, otherwise we'll both die. Li Shoulin's face was grim as he turned his head to look at Yuji, who was hiding in the dark corner. Yuji bit her lips lightly, looking embarrassed. Indeed, it was because she saw Zhang Xiaoyu's handsome appearance, extraordinary aura, and a surge of spring in her heart that she couldn't control herself. She went to tease him for a while. Unexpectedly, Zhang Xiaoyu was practicing swordsmanship at Qingyun Temple and keenly sensed something was wrong, tracking him all the way. Although Zhang Xiaoyu had one arm chopped off, 2 legs broken, and his strength weakened due to being penetrated through the shoulder collarbones on both sides, they dared not kill him for fear of provoking even stronger Qingyun Temple sword cultivators. The reputation of Qingyun Temple is not small within the territory of the Great Summer Dynasty, and it is the most rewarding. Zhaozuiyuan.com. Especially for every disciple of Qingyun Temple, the next sword intent is left in their body by the elders. When a person dies, the sword intent dissipates, and they will immediately detect and pursue it. That's why they dare not kill Zhang Xiaoyu. It can only be locked in the dungeon and dealt with after the incident is completed. When they speak. Outside, Lu Hongshang stood on the roof of the 5-story attic of Li Mansion, her gaze sharp as a sword, and she had already turned to the courtyard where Li Shoulin lived. Just now, she was already resting and practicing, but she keenly felt a familiar aura. That was the aura belonging to Zhang Xiaoyu, who was instantly startled and traced all the way to the Li Mansion, sensing the eerie aura belonging to the evil god. Lu Hongshang's figure flickered like a fairy descending to earth in the middle of the month, and her aura was also extremely fierce. Moon-watching sword technique. Borrow a piece of moonlight as sword light. Her white long sword in her hand was covered with a hazy moonlight, and she slashed it fiercely. Boom! The roof was split in half from the middle. Li Shoulin's body skyrocketed, his clothes shattered, and a faint golden light flowed on his skin. He transformed into a 3-meter giant, made of copper skin and iron bones, indestructible. When he looked up, the black cloth that covered his eyes had shattered. However, his eyes opened, and a red light flickered in them, but they were gone, leaving only 2 holes. The 3-corpse divine transformation is a top-notch technique for horizontally refining the physical body. When cultivating a small accomplishment, the physical body is made of copper skin and iron bones, making it a copper corpse. However, after achieving a great accomplishment, the physical body is like gold, immortal and immortal, making it a golden corpse. When reaching the final realm, bathed in the sunlight, reborn and transformed, one can become a divine corpse. With one punch, it fiercely hit the sword energy that had fallen down, and surprisingly, it shattered the sword energy alive.